Hey guys, Jim Edwards here, and welcome back to Sales Copywriting and Content Marketing Hacks Podcast. You guys need to tell your friends about us because we turned 30 today. So
30.
I'm just saying, if you like the content, you need to tell a friend. Remember that old Prel commercial back from the 70s when it was like, they told two friends, and they told two friends, and they told two friends, and all of a sudden, you remember that or no?
Oh yeah, Prel. Man, that burned your eyeballs.
Yeah.
Man, that hurt.
It was cheap though. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about your Epiphany Bridge story because there seems to be some confusion. We got a question in from somebody that this was like a frickin', I don't know, something from Encyclopedia Britannica that just round and round and round and round and basically went and it was.
Yeah. Basically wanted to know where to use it, when to use it, how often to use it, how long should it be?
Right.
It was a question with multiple questions.
To say the least.
Yes.
So what's the first question, Stu?
Well, let's just say, what is it? And
okay.
how do we use it?
So what is an Epiphany Bridge story or an origin story? You've kind of heard, you'll hear those used interchangeably. An Epiphany Bridge story typically is where something happened and you had an epiphany, and then that changed everything moving forward. It was one of those things, that 6 degree of separation thing where it's one of those moments in your life where you have an epiphany about. I can tell you one that I had an epiphany driving down Route 60 in Williamsburg, Virginia with my wife. She was driving her little Geo Tracker, which was a little Jeep looking thing. And it was 1997. And I looked at her and I said, if we're ever going to get rich, it's going to happen because of this internet thing. I don't know how. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to make it happen, but I know that if we are ever going to get rich, it's going to happen because of the internet. And that was an epiphany that I had. And everything that I've done since then, I can trace back to that conversation with my wife when I had that epiphany. And that's a mini Epiphany Bridge story right there. An origin story is more where someone or something came from. So let me tell you the story of when I wrote my first book and the 4 years that it took. And then when I got rejected by 40 different publishers. See the slight difference. One was an epiphany. I had an idea. It was like, boom. Yeah, and the heavens parted and the wisdom of the universe was bestowed upon me, as opposed to an origin story, which is where you explain where everybody came from. So if you're a big Star Wars fan, the fourth Star Wars movie, which was allegedly the first Star Wars movie, which was the first in a long line of 3 Star Wars movies that sucked, that was basically an origin story of Anakin Skywalker, and who eventually became Darth Vader.
Right.
That was an origin story. An epiphany story might be when, I don't know, Luke decided that he needed to go and learn the Force. And he's sitting there talking to Obi-Wan, and he says, he comes back and his family's all burned up, and he tells Obi-Wan, teach me how to use the Force. I got nothing left. That thing, and they take off in the speeder. That then became an epiphany. He had an epiphany. That's the difference. So what's the next question? Or how do you use them? Sorry.
Yes.
I was just trying to, that's examples of epiphany stories. So how do you use them? Typically you can use them a whole bunch of different ways. You can use it as content where you do a Facebook Live, you use it on a webinar, you use it to illustrate a point, to fill in the background, to draw yourself and your audience closer together, and to fill in the blanks. You also use it to answer the question, why? Because that's a question that people ask a lot. Why you? Why this? Why now? Why should I believe you? Why are you qualified to teach me? All these things that build the foundation that you can do everything going forward from there, because you've built that that you filled in all the blanks, and now you're explaining to people how to move forward with your product, your service, your coaching, your whatever it is. And so that's basically how you use it. You can use it like any Lego block of sales copy or content creation, as a standalone story, as part of a webinar, as part of a teleseminar, whatever.
Yeah, I think the biggest point of the Epiphany Bridge, as well as the origin story, is that it humanizes you. You know,
Yeah.
to your audience, to your market. It says, "Oh, he's just like I was."
Yeah.
Right. And now he can do this, you know,
And,
so it's
right.
kind of lays the journey for people to follow in your footsteps.
That's a great point. And it also not only humanizes you, but it also gives them hope and a proxy to see, okay, if somebody like me can do it, then I can do it. It
Absolutely
literally lays that bridge, not only between where you were, where you are now, and the solution that you're offering going forward, but it builds a mental bridge that they can cross because you crossed it too.
Yep. There's a great saying is you have to see it to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes it helps to have somebody, you know, in your life that has done something, right? Whether that person is a personal friend or a family member, or it's someone that you see on Facebook Live, or, you know, somebody has a commercial business, you know, somebody who is guiding people through a series of processes to get them to where they want to be. That is where it really comes in handy.
Yep, I agree. Okay, what next? What was the next question?
How long should they be?
Okay, that's a great question. Long enough. Can I get by with that, or should I? No, I'm just playing.
Well, I mean, you just gave a great one with your Epiphany Bridge. That was less than a minute long. So
right.
it can be part elevator speech, but it can also be a big 20-minute story on Facebook Live where you really get into the emotion of your journey.
Right.
And that is where it can really pull people in. You might get them hooked with the elevator version, but then you really tell the full story and pull some emotion into the discussion.
Exactly. Really just depends on the context of where you're using it. If you're wanting to use it as part of an introduction to something else, like a Facebook Live video, you could tell your origin story in 30 seconds or less. You know, I could say my origin story, I started out selling on the internet. I sold a book that took me 4 years to write. I figured out how to do SEO. I figured out how to write sales letters. I figured out how to sell and take credit cards back in the 90s when it was really tough to be able to do it. People started asking me, hey, how did you do all this? I see you selling these ebooks. And that is why I wrote 7-Day ebook, was because all these people were asking, how were you able to sell these ebooks on the internet? And then I got written up in the New York Times, Entrepreneur Magazine, and here we are today. So, I mean, that was probably 45 seconds, but that in effect was my origin story. Now I can spin that into a 2-hour freaking talk on a boat.
Absolutely.
If I want to. You need to come on the gym boat, by the way, Stu and everyone else listening. So it just depends. It really depends. And what I would recommend that you do, especially if there's an Epiphany Bridge story that is integral to your whole business, is that you create a version that has as much detail as possible first. And then, I mean, really get into it. How did you feel? Who did you see? Who did you talk to? What happened? What did your family do? What did your coworkers? I mean, all this stuff. It might end up being 5 or 6 pages long. It might be 30 minutes. And then you just start whittle it down until it's tight. I mean, it's like a movie plot.
Yep.
And then from there, it's like an accordion. You can expand and contract it based on your needs, but you don't want, you want to have it down and you want to know all the details, mainly so it's consistent all the time. What you don't want to do is kind of tell it one way and kind of tell it another way, because people are listening, they're paying attention. And if they spot an inconsistency, they will think that you're lying. Even though you're not doing it on purpose, they will think you're lying because it's an inconsistent story. So I would recommend that you really codify it, and get it down so that you could tell it in any length when called upon at any time.
So how about this? How often should they be used, with your content creation?
Okay, so here's the thing. An Epiphany Bridge, especially an Epiphany story, a lot of people think you only have one Epiphany story. You only have one origin story, and that's not true. Every product you make, every situation can have an Epiphany Bridge story, can have an origin story. I could tell the origin story of how I create a product to sell off my house. I can tell an origin story about when I met Stu and started working out. I can tell, you have an unlimited supply of them, because every event, every interaction, all that stuff can have one of those. So what we're really talking about here is using a structure when you are creating the content. And we talked about this, I think it was episode 5. We talked about the hero's journey.
Yep.
I think it was episode 5 of the podcast. And I'd encourage you to go back and watch that, because we spent a lot of time on it. It was a very good episode. Doesn't have nearly as many views as it should. So go back right and watch it. So what you need to understand more is it's a style of storytelling that hooks people in and then gives you a way to launch them to the next step when you're ready. So when people have heard say, okay, all of your content, all your Facebook Lives should be an Epiphany Bridge, and they think, well, if I keep telling that same story over and over and over, it's not that you only have one Epiphany Bridge story. You can tell an Epiphany Bridge or an origin story for pretty much anything. I could tell the Epiphany Bridge story about when I decided to do the very first gym boat. I remember exactly where I was. I was riding my red 4-wheeler down the driveway at the property I'm on right now, but we had a double wide trailer on there right then. And I said, you know what? I love to cruise, and I bet you I could find 15 people that would want to go on a cruise with me, and I could teach them stuff about ebooks. And I could charge each of them like $3,000, and it'll work. And I sat there on the 4-wheeler, I said, it'll work. And I told my neighbor what I was going to do. He said, damn, that's a cool idea. And so I went in and I wrote up the sales letter and I put it out. And I had 12 people sign up within a week. And then we got a couple more. And we went and did a cruise, and it was amazing. And we had a great time. And I made friends that are friends with mine to this day. But if I had never had that thought in the middle of my driveway on a red 4-wheeler, it never would have happened. Now, literally, I did that off the top of my head. I'm just kind of knowing the framework. Now, could I have thrown in some other details in there about how it was really actually a total pain in the ass to do the first one, because we had no idea what we were doing. And then when we did the actual thing, because our group was so small, they put us in this karaoke bar with all these mirrors that looked like they should have been on the ceiling of a whorehouse. Oh. And we were trying to film it. So my mom ran down and found the room steward, got him to give us a bunch of sheets. And we literally were using gaffer tape to put up these sheets over these mirrors so that we could have a background that we could film against. Then the ship came in and started yelling at us because we were using our own wireless microphone system, and it was interfering with their onboard systems.
Hey, some lessons learned.
It was something, man. And then I finally got going, and this lady sat down and knocked my laptop with her knee, because I had to set it on this little cocktail table. And I overreacted, and I pissed her and her husband off, and they never came back. And just all the crap that happened, and it was still an amazing experience. So, I mean, you can add and you see what I mean about adding and subtracting. You figure out what the conclusion is that you want people to have as a result of telling the story. And when you know the framework and you know your intention, then you can craft the story in such a way that it automatically leads people to whatever the intention is that you have for that. So it's, when we say that you should have an epiphany, you should do an Epiphany Bridge story every time, or people have heard that said. What's being said actually is use the story formula for your content consistently, and it creates content that really engages people. So.
Right. And it kind of tells people like, this is the product or the service or the idea behind, this is why I came up, this is why I'm selling this product,
right.
service or idea,
so it's, product, service, idea, course of action, whatever it is. So it doesn't have to be a pitch every single time. In fact, it probably shouldn't be, just because people get a little stinky after a while.
In fact, a fun thing to do is, my first time I ever heard of the Epiphany Bridge, I was like, do I have one of those? And then I went around and I was like, oh, I kind of have one here. Let me fine tune this a little bit. And then I started noticing them in other people's marketing. Right. And there's a lot of them out there. So it's not like it's some new concept. Go and just Google it and check it out, and you'll see a ton of great videos. You'll see some good sales copy, of people writing it as an article, to get people like just a little more information about who is behind the products and services they're selling.
Yeah, definitely go back and review episode 5.
Yeah, that's a good one, because we both did one in that one. That was fun. Yeah.
In fact, I did Stu's better than he did.
Yes, you did. It was good.
All right, cool. Any other questions about the Epiphany Bridge?
No, that was it.
Okay.
So now the question is, can you put it into some of your own sales copy? I challenge those listeners to do that. Let's do it.
Let me ask you a question, Stu. When do you remember if you had an epiphany or anything with our interaction, and tell people about the epiphany that you had about your the covers of your books?
Oh yeah. I mean, I have one for, several times a year. I have an epiphany of some sorts, whether it's a new product I come up with, a new market I'm going to try to hit, with a new product or service, a new way to say something, build a whole new web page. Right. So all these little things, come up that, that's my idea. I'm going to do it. But yeah, after talking to Jim, and I remember it plain as day, I'd been selling ebooks for 10 years. And then I saw Jim's email address said ebook coach. Right. In his
now everybody's going to email me. Good job.
It's all right. You want people to email you. It gives you content. So I said, so what's this ebook coach thing? So what do you do? And I didn't know who Jim Edwards was. I did not. Right. And then, so he explained to me, I'm like, oh, and he goes, here, in fact, try this. I think it was the 27-day
book. Yeah.
27-day book. And he goes, try this process and tell me what you think. And so I did. And I created a book in 27 days because my big question was, how do you get these things on Amazon? Right. I've been selling, books on my own website for years. And I was like, how do you get these things on Amazon? And so he showed me how to do it in this 27-day program. And there was a step in there that outsourced getting covers done for ebooks, which I was just making my own ebooks off of, some stock footage or maybe a logo or something like that. And they didn't look good at all. It was
just sucked real bad.
It was kind of a waste of my effort and So anyway, I decided right then and there, after this first experience of a 27-day ebook course, that I loved the process so much, I'm going to do it with all 35 of my other ebooks. Right. And that was a big, update cycle. It took me about 3 months to do that. And I was doing several a week, like 2 or 3, 4 a week, to get that done. And, but I had almost immediate success with those changes. I found a guy on Fiverr who did it, some dude from Sri Lanka. I said, hey, I got some books for you. If you do this one, I'm going to give you 30 more, within the next month. And he was like, okay. And so we became actually good friends. He did a great job. And now, I think it was within a month of me starting that, automatically had like a 30% increase in sales just from a prettier book cover. I hadn't even gotten to the updates yet of the ebooks, which I was in the process of doing, but just those covers alone changed who I thought Jim Edwards was.
That's really cool.
Immediately.
It's funny because I just thought, I know we were wrapping this up, but I started thinking about where do you look for Epiphany Bridge stories or origin stories? And as you kind of think back about stuff, think about like when there have been changes in your life, when something changed for the better or for the worse. Think about when your income went up or went down. Think about when a relationship went good or went bad. Think about when your weight went up or went down. Think about when you're just when there's been a change, because all change, good or bad, can usually be linked back to some sort of a decision that you made or an event, or you didn't make or didn't recognize, and then one day you realized you had an epiphany about what was going on, and then once you had that bit of enlightenment, you were able to make a change or start moving in a new direction. So look for significant events, look for significant shifts, look for those kinds of things, and that'll help you identify where you should look to see if you did or didn't have an epiphany. And the cool thing is, you may not have had an epiphany then, but looking back, you can have an epiphany now. And that's when I realized 30 years ago, I was a dick and I need to start being you understand what I mean? That's the epiphany can happen anywhere, anytime. And once you get in that habit, you can make it happen. So
I like that. Finding change, finding a decision made or not made. Another one is too, especially in business as it relates to business, is find that thing that you did or didn't do. Find that thing that you did that made you say, man, I wish I'd have done this 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Those are usually really big items that moved you in the right direction. And you sit there and you say, man, I'm trying to think about 30% increase. I'd have done this 5 years ago. You just start doing the math of, what you missed out on.
Yeah, so, I agree. Cool. Well, great job. All right. What should they do next, Stu?
They should go to the closed Facebook page, Sales Copy Content Marketing Hacks closed Facebook page. And you can ask questions. We will get on them immediately, whether it's by another podcast or filling in the blanks of a reply right underneath you. But check out the podcast as well. It's on YouTube podcast, where podcasts are played at iTunes and Google Play and Spotify.
Cool. All right. Well, everybody have a great day, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.